When Sarah discovers her husband Michael's betrayal, her seemingly perfect life shatters overnight. As the secrets unravel, she grapples with heartbreak, betrayal, and the fallout on their young son, Jamie. Amidst the chaos, Sarah faces shocking revelations about Michael's double life and an unexpected confrontation with Lauren, the woman who entered their lives as a friend, but became much more. Will Sarah find the strength to rebuild her life and protect her family? Or will the weight of betrayal prove too much to bear? Join us for this gripping story of resilience, trust, and the quest for redemption. It was the fall of 2015, a year that seemed simpler than most, at least on the surface. In a little town tucked away in the Midwest, life moved at a slower pace, the kind of place where everybody knew your name and secrets were supposed to be impossible to keep. But, as we'll see, appearances can be deceiving. The story starts with Sarah and her husband, Michael. They had been married for 12 years, long enough to weather the ups and downs of life, but still short of what they'd once called forever. Sarah was the picture of small-town stability, running a small flower shop on Main Street and volunteering at the local school. Michael, on the other hand, worked long hours as a mechanic at his father's garage. Together, they raised their 10-year-old son, Jamie, in a cozy house just a few blocks from the town square. To most, they seemed like the perfect couple. Sarah had a warm smile that lit up every room she entered, and Michael was dependable, the kind of man you could call at 3 a.m. if your car broke down. But behind the closed doors of their cheerful home, things weren't as perfect as they seemed. Lately, their conversations had become clipped, more about logistics than Love Jamie's soccer practice, the grocery list, and whose turn it was to take out the trash were the main topics of discussion. It wasn't that they didn't care for each other. It was more like they'd forgotten how to show it. Then there was Lauren. She had moved to town 6 months earlier, renting the little yellow house 2 doors down from Sarah and Michael. Lauren was everything Sarah wasn't: spontaneous, free-spirited, and effortlessly glamorous, in a way that made her stand out in their sleepy community. With her sleek black hair and high heels that clicked confidently on the pavement, she quickly became the talk of the town. Some whispered that she was a writer. Others said she was recovering from a divorce. Whatever her story was, Lauren didn't seem to care about fitting in. Sarah met Lauren one afternoon while pruning roses in her front yard. Lauren had stopped to compliment the blooms and ended up staying for tea. They clicked immediately, and Sarah found herself drawn to Lauren's boldness. Over the next few weeks, the two became fast friends, sharing secrets over wine in the evenings and laughing like old friends. Michael had noticed Lauren too. At first, it was in the same way most of the town did, with curiosity. But curiosity can be a dangerous thing. One evening, while Sarah was out running errands, Michael found himself walking past Lauren's house on his way back from work. The porch light was on, and Lauren was sitting on the steps, her legs curled under her as she sipped from a coffee mug. "Long day?" she asked, flashing him that effortless smile. Michael hesitated but nodded. "Yeah, just finished up at the garage." "Want some coffee? I just brewed a fresh pot," she offered. It seemed harmless enough. Michael sat on the porch steps, and they talked about the town, about work, about nothing in particular. She had a way of making him feel at ease, like she was genuinely interested in every word he said. By the time he stood to leave, the coffee had gone cold, and he realized he'd been there for almost an hour. Sarah didn't notice anything unusual. At first, Michael was still coming home late, still grumbling about the never-ending line of cars at the garage. If anything, he seemed more upbeat, smiling to himself as he worked on fixing the leaky faucet in the kitchen or helped Jamie with his science project. But little things started to change. Michael began taking extra care with his appearance, shaving more often, wearing cologne he hadn't touched in years. When Sarah asked about it, he shrugged it off. "Just felt like cleaning up a bit," he said, brushing it away like it was nothing. Lauren's friendship with Sarah only grew stronger. They shared recipes, exchanged books, and talked about their lives. Lauren seemed to know all the right things to say, encouraging Sarah to take better care of herself, to reclaim the spark she felt she'd lost over the years. It felt good to have a friend who understood, who didn't judge. One evening, while Michael was at work, Lauren stopped by with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. They sat on Sarah's back porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon as they talked about everything and nothing. Lauren brought up relationships, asking Sarah what she thought kept a marriage strong. "It's about trust," Sarah said after a long pause. "Even when things aren't perfect, you have to believe in each other." Lauren nodded, swirling the wine in her glass. Trust is tricky, though it's not always as solid as we think it is. The comment lingered in Sarah's mind long after Lauren had gone home. Trust had been the cornerstone of her marriage, but she couldn't deny the creeping sense of distance she felt with Michael lately. She told herself it was just the stress of everyday life. One night, Sarah woke up to find Michael wasn't in bed. She got up thinking he might be in the kitchen, but the house was quiet. His truck wasn't in the driveway. Panic gripped her chest for a moment before she rationalized that he must have gone out to clear his head. She tried calling his cell, but it went straight to voicemail. When Michael finally came home an hour later, he mumbled something about needing to check on a late repair job at the garage. Sarah wanted to believe him, but his tone was off, rushed and defensive, like he'd rehearsed the excuse she didn't press further. Not that night. The next morning, Jamie innocently mentioned seeing Miss Lauren walking with Daddy by the park when he was playing soccer with his friends. Sarah's heart sank. Why would Michael have been with Lauren and not mentioned it? The knot of doubt tightened in her chest. Sarah decided to push the thought aside, chalking it up to her imagination running wild. But as the days passed, she noticed more signs. Michael's phone, which had always been left carelessly on the kitchen counter, was now glued to his pocket. He started coming home later, always with a plausible excuse, but never the same one twice. By now, Sarah couldn't ignore it anymore. Something wasn't right. But before she could confront Michael, she needed to be sure. One evening, when Michael was in the shower, she took his phone and scrolled through his messages. Most were mundane, updates from the garage, group chats with his brothers. But there, buried halfway down, was a thread with Lauren. She hesitated, her heart pounding as she opened it. The messages weren't explicit, but they were enough to make her stomach drop. Lauren had texted him earlier that day. "Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again." Michael's response was even worse. "Me too. Same time tomorrow." Sarah's world tilted. She dropped the phone on the counter, her hands trembling. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was Lauren, her friend, the person she'd let into her life. Sarah felt her chest tighten as she put Michael's phone down. Her mind raced with 1,000 thoughts, each one more painful than the last. She didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the messages were undeniable. Lauren wasn't just a neighbor or a friend. She was something more to Michael. The betrayal felt personal, a double-edged sword cutting through both her marriage and the trust she had built with Lauren. That night, Sarah didn't sleep. She stayed awake, replaying the past few months in her mind, trying to pinpoint where it all went wrong. Was it her fault? Had she been too distracted with Jamie or the flower shop? Or was this something Michael had been hiding all along? The next morning, Sarah decided to confront Michael, but she needed to pick her moment carefully. She didn't want Jamie to overhear. As Michael sat at the kitchen table, sipping his coffee and scrolling through his phone, Sarah took a deep breath and sat across from him. "Michael," she began, her voice steady but strained. "Can we talk?" He looked up, surprised by her serious tone. "Of course, what's up?" She hesitated, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her sweater. "I've noticed you've been different lately. Coming home late, spending more time on your phone. Is there something you want to tell me?" Michael's eyes narrowed slightly, and he shifted in his seat. "What do you mean I've just been busy with work?" Sarah's heart pounded as she leaned forward. "I saw the messages, Michael, from Lauren." His face froze for a split second before he composed himself. "You went through my phone?" he asked, his tone more defensive than she'd expected. "I did," she admitted, her voice firm. "And I had every reason to tell me the truth, Michael. What's going on between you and Lauren?" Michael sighed and leaned back in his chair, rubbing his hands over his face. "It's not what you think," he said finally. "She's just a friend." "A friend?" Sarah's voice cracked. "Michael, friends don't send messages like that. Friends don't meet up late at night without telling their spouses." Michael looked away, his jaw tightening. "Nothing happened," he said. "We've been talking. That's all she's been easy to talk to." Sarah felt a wave of anger and hurt wash over her. Easy to talk to? And I'm not? Is that what this is about? Michael stood, pacing the kitchen. "It's not like that, Sarah. I don't know how it started. She just listens. She understands things I can't talk about with anyone else." "And what about me?" Sarah snapped, standing as well. "I'm your wife, Michael. I've been here for you every step of the way. If you're feeling distant or unhappy, you should have come to me, not her." Michael stopped pacing and looked at her, guilt written all over his face. "I know I messed up, but I swear, it hasn't gone any further than that." Sarah didn't believe him. The messages, the secrecy, the way he'd been acting, it all pointed to something deeper. But before she could say anything else, Jamie came running into the kitchen, asking about breakfast. The conversation had to be put on hold. Over the next few days, the tension between Sarah and Michael was palpable. They went through the motions of daily life, but the trust between them was shattered. Sarah found herself avoiding Lauren, unsure of how to face her. She wanted answers, but she wasn't ready for the confrontation. One afternoon, while Michael was at work, Sarah decided to take matters into her own hands. She walked down the street to Lauren's house, her heart pounding with a mix of anger and dread. Lauren opened the door, her expression warm and inviting until she saw the look on Sarah's face. "Sarah," she said, her voice laced with concern. "Is everything okay?" Sarah crossed her arms, her gaze unwavering. "No, Lauren, everything is not okay. We need to talk." Lauren stepped aside, gesturing for Sarah to come in. The house was as perfectly curated as Lauren herself, but Sarah didn't take the time to admire it. She turned to face Lauren as soon as the door closed. "I know about you and Michael," Sarah said, her voice sharp. Lauren's eyes widened, but she quickly regained her composure. "I'm not sure what you mean." "Don't play dumb," Sarah snapped. "I saw the messages. I know you've been meeting up with him." Lauren sighed and ran a hand through her sleek black hair. "Sarah, it's not what you think. Michael and we've just been talking. He's been going through a lot, and I've been trying to help." "Help?" Sarah's voice rose. "By undermining our marriage, by sneaking around behind my back?" "I wasn't sneaking around," Lauren said defensively. "Michael needed someone to talk to. He felt like he couldn't come to you." Sarah felt tears sting her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "And you thought it was your place to be that person. You're my friend, Lauren, or at least, I thought you were." Lauren softened, her expression tinged with regret. "I never meant to hurt you, Sarah. I didn't realize things would get so complicated." "Complicated?" Sarah repeated bitterly. "You think that justifies what you've done?" Before Lauren could respond, Sarah turned and walked out, slamming the door behind her. Her hands shook as she made her way back home, the weight of everything pressing down on her. She felt betrayed not just by Michael, but by someone she had trusted as a friend. That evening, Sarah told Michael about her confrontation with Lauren. He listened quietly, his face pale. When she finished, he nodded. "You're right," he said. "I should have never let it get this far." Sarah looked at him, her heart heavy. "So what now, Michael? How do we fix this?" "I'll stop seeing her," he said. "I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." Sarah wanted to believe him, but the doubt lingered. Trust wasn't something that could be repaired overnight. It would take time, effort, and honesty, things she wasn't sure Michael was capable of anymore. As the days turned into weeks, Michael made an effort to rebuild their relationship. He spent more time at home, helping with Jamie, and making small gestures to show he cared. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was still off. She found herself questioning everything he said, wondering if he was truly committed to making things right, or just going through the motions. Lauren, meanwhile, disappeared from their lives. Her house remained dark, and Sarah heard from a neighbor that she had moved out of town. It should have been a relief, but it felt like an empty victory. The damage had already been done. Sarah started seeing a therapist, hoping to make sense of her emotions. She didn't know if her marriage could be saved, but she needed to find clarity, for herself, for Jamie, and for whatever came next. Remember, relationships are complex, and stories like Sarah and Michael's remind us how fragile trust can be. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel. For more tales like this, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Sarah's days became a blur of suppressed emotions and forced smiles. On the surface, she was holding things together, managing the flower shop, taking Jamie to school, and maintaining a polite distance from Michael. But under it all, a storm was brewing. The betrayal had fractured their marriage in ways that couldn't be easily repaired, and as much as Michael tried to make amends, Sarah wasn't ready to forgive. One evening, as Sarah was closing the flower shop, she noticed a familiar figure standing outside. It was Lauren. Her once confident demeanor seemed subdued, her face pale under the streetlights. "What are you doing here?" Sarah asked, her voice sharp. "I came to talk," Lauren replied softly. "I owe you an explanation." "I don't think there's anything left to explain," Sarah said, crossing her arms. "You betrayed me, Lauren. Both of you did." Lauren looked down, shame evident in her posture. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. When I moved here, I was trying to start over, Michael. He was just someone who listened when I needed it. I never intended to hurt you." Sarah's anger flared. "You didn't intend to hurt me. That's supposed to make it okay. You knew he was married, Lauren. You knew what you were doing." Lauren's eyes filled with tears, but Sarah wasn't moved. She turned away, locking the shop door behind her. "You need to leave," Sarah said firmly. "I don't want to see you again." As Lauren walked away, Sarah felt a pang of guilt. But it was quickly swallowed by the anger that had been simmering inside her for weeks. Lauren's apology didn't change anything. The damage was done. At home, Michael was waiting for her in the living room. He stood as she walked in, his face etched with worry. "I saw her," Sarah said, cutting him off before he could speak. "She came to the shop." Michael sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I didn't know she was back." "She said she wanted to explain," Sarah continued, her voice tight. "But it doesn't matter, I'm done listening to excuses." Michael took a step closer, his expression pleading. "Sarah, I know I messed up. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm trying. I want to fix this." "How, Michael?" Sarah snapped. "How do you fix something like this? You broke my trust. You broke us." Jamie's voice interrupted them from the top of the stairs. "Are you guys fighting again?" Both Sarah and Michael froze, their argument momentarily forgotten. Sarah forced a smile and turned to Jamie. "No, sweetheart, everything's fine. Go back to bed." As Jamie retreated to his room, Michael looked at Sarah, his eyes filled with regret. "I don't want to lose our family." Sarah didn't respond. Instead, she walked past him and into the kitchen, her mind racing. She wanted to believe Michael, but the doubt was too strong. A few days later, Sarah received an unexpected call from a friend in town. Apparently, Lauren had been spotted at a bar on the outskirts of town, and she wasn't alone. Michael was with her. The news hit Sarah like a punch to the gut. She had started to believe that Michael was truly committed to making things right, but this felt like the ultimate betrayal. Without thinking, she grabbed her car keys and drove to the bar. When she arrived, the scene was exactly as her friend had described. Through the window, she saw Michael and Lauren sitting in a corner booth, their heads close together as they talked. Sarah's hands shook as she pushed open the door and stepped inside. The noise of the bar seemed to fade as Sarah approached their table. Michael looked up, his expression shifting from surprise to panic. "Sarah, this isn't what it looks like," he stammered. "It never is it?" Sarah replied, her voice trembling with anger. "You said you were done with her. You said you wanted to fix this." Lauren stood, her face pale. "Sarah, please." "Don't," Sarah snapped. "Don't say a word. You've done enough." Michael reached for her arm, but she pulled away. "I'm done, Michael. I can't do this anymore." Without waiting for a response, Sarah turned and walked out of the bar, tears streaming down her face. She didn't stop until she was in her car, the door slammed shut behind her. The weight of everything she had been holding in finally came crashing down, and she sobbed into her hands. That night marked a turning point for Sarah. She realized she couldn't keep clinging to the hope that things would go back to the way they were. Michael had made his choices, and now she had to make hers. In the days that followed, Sarah began to take steps toward reclaiming her life. She met with a lawyer to discuss her options and started seeing a therapist regularly. She also confided in a close friend who helped her see that she deserved better than the constant pain and betrayal. Michael tried to reach out, leaving her messages and showing up at the flower shop, but Sarah stood firm. She needed space to heal, and she couldn't do that with him in the picture. Jamie, too, sensed the changes in their family. Sarah did her best to reassure him, spending extra time with him and making sure he felt loved and supported. She explained things in simple terms, careful not to vilify Michael, but also making it clear that their family dynamic was changing. Lauren, meanwhile, disappeared once again. Sarah heard through the grapevine that she had moved out of town for good this time, and she felt a bittersweet sense of relief. Lauren's departure didn't erase the pain, but it gave Sarah the clarity she needed to move forward. As the weeks turned into months, Sarah found herself slowly rebuilding her life. She poured her energy into the flower shop, expanding her business, and even hiring an assistant to help with the growing workload. She also started reconnecting with old friends, rediscovering the parts of herself that had been lost in the chaos of her marriage. Michael, on the other hand, seemed to spiral. Without Sarah to anchor him, he struggled to find his footing. He apologized repeatedly, both privately and publicly. But Sarah knew that words weren't enough. She needed actions, and by the time Michael realized that, it was too late. One evening, Sarah sat on the porch with Jamie, watching the sunset. He looked up at her and asked, "Are you happy, Mum?" The question caught her off guard, but she smiled and nodded. "I'm getting there, sweetheart, I'm getting there." Remember, life's challenges can be tough, but they also teach us how to grow and move forward. If you're enjoying this story and want to hear more like it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Your thoughts matter, so drop a comment below. I'd love to hear what you think. Sarah had always believed that strength came from holding things together, but as the weeks passed after the confrontation at the bar, she realized her strength was in letting go. That didn't mean the road was easy. It was filled with anger, heartbreak, and moments where she doubted her decisions. But through it all, She kept moving forward. The tension between her and Michael reached a boiling point when he showed up unannounced at the house one evening. Sarah had been wrapping up dinner with Jamie, trying to keep things as normal as possible for him, but the knock at the door brought everything to the surface again. Michael stood there, his face drawn and weary. "We need to talk," he said. Sarah stepped outside, closing the door behind her to keep Jamie from hearing. "Michael, we've said everything there is to say." "No, we haven't," he insisted. "I can't just walk away from this from us." Sarah crossed her arms, her voice firm but calm. "Michael, you already did. Every time you lied, every time you chose her over me, you walked away." "I never stopped loving you," he said, his voice breaking. She shook her head, her resolve solidifying. "Love isn't just a feeling, Michael. It's what you do. And what you did wasn't love." Michael took a step closer, his hands trembling. "I know I made mistakes. I know I don't deserve another chance. But I'm asking for one, for Jamie's sake." The mention of their son made Sarah's chest tighten, but she held her ground. "Jamie deserves parents who are honest with each other, who respect each other. I can't give him that with you." Michael's shoulders slumped as he realized she wasn't going to budge. For a moment, they stood there in silence, the weight of everything between them hanging heavy in the air. "I'm sorry," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry for everything." Sarah nodded, her eyes filled with unshed tears. "I know." As Michael walked away, Sarah felt a strange sense of relief. It wasn't closure. There was still too much pain for that, but it was a step forward. For the first time in months, she felt like she could breathe again. The pivotal moment came 2 weeks later. Sarah had just finished locking up the flower shop when she saw a familiar car pull up to the curb. It was Lauren against her better judgment. Sarah waited as Lauren stepped out and approached her. "Sarah," Lauren began, her voice tentative, "I know I'm probably the last person you want to see right now, but I need to say something." Sarah raised an eyebrow, her patience wearing thin. "What could you possibly have to say that I haven't already heard?" Lauren hesitated, her hands twisting nervously. "I need you to know the truth about Michael." Sarah crossed her arms, her skepticism clear. "And what truth is that?" Lauren took a deep breath. "When I moved here, I was in a bad place. I thought I could start over. But I made mistakes. I let my loneliness get the better of me. And I crossed lines I never should have." "Is this supposed to be an apology?" Sarah asked, her tone cutting. "Yes," Lauren said earnestly. "But it's more than that, Michael. He wasn't just talking to me. There were others." Sarah's stomach dropped. "What are you talking about?" Lauren hesitated again. But then she pulled out her phone and showed Sarah a series of messages. They weren't just between her and Michael. There were messages from other women, some local, some not. "I found these after he ended things with me," Lauren explained. "I thought you deserved to know." Sarah felt a wave of nausea as she scrolled through the messages. The betrayal she'd felt before paled in comparison to this. Michael hadn't just been unfaithful. He'd been living a double life. "Why are you showing me this now?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. "Because I know what it's like to be lied to," Lauren said softly. "And you deserve the truth, even if it hurts." Sarah stared at the phone, her mind racing. She wanted to scream, to cry, to throw the phone across the street. But instead, she handed it back to Lauren and took a deep breath. "Thank you for telling me," she said, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. Lauren nodded, her expression filled with regret. "I'm sorry for everything, Sarah. I hope someday you can forgive me." As Lauren walked away, Sarah felt a strange mix of emotions: anger, sadness, and a flicker of gratitude. Lauren's confession had shattered any lingering illusions about her marriage, but it also gave Sarah the clarity she needed to move forward. That night, Sarah sat down with Jamie and had the hardest conversation of her life. She explained, in the simplest terms, that things were going to change. She reassured him that it wasn't his fault, that both she and Michael loved him more than anything, but that they couldn't stay together. Jamie's eyes filled with tears, and he asked the question Sarah had been dreading. Does this mean Dad's not coming back? Sarah pulled him into a hug, her own tears spilling over. It means things will be different, sweetheart, but we're still a family that's never going to change. Over the next few days, Sarah began taking concrete steps to rebuild her life. She finalized the divorce papers, set boundaries with Michael, and focused on creating a stable, loving environment for Jamie. It wasn't easy, but with each step, she felt a little stronger. The climax of the story came on a crisp autumn evening, almost a year after the initial betrayal. Sarah was hosting a small gathering at the flower shop to celebrate its one-year anniversary under her sole ownership. Friends and neighbors filled the cozy space, laughing and chatting as they admired the arrangements she'd created. Michael showed up uninvited, standing awkwardly near the door as he watched the festivities. Sarah noticed him but decided not to make a scene. She had moved on, and tonight was about celebrating her progress, not revisiting the past. As the evening wound down, Michael approached her. "You've done amazing things here," he said, gesturing to the shop. "Thank you," Sarah replied, her tone polite but distant. Michael hesitated, then said, "I just wanted to say I'm proud of you, and I'm sorry for everything." Sarah looked at him, her expression unreadable. "Thank you, Michael. I hope you find what you're looking for." It wasn't the dramatic confrontation he might have expected, but it was exactly what Sarah needed. For the first time, she felt truly free. Life isn't always fair, and relationships don't always have happy endings. But stories like Sarah's remind us that growth comes from facing the hardest moments and finding the strength to move forward. If you enjoyed this recap, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more stories of resilience and transformation. And let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think. Sarah had always believed she could weather any storm, but this storm felt relentless. The betrayal, the lies, and now the revelations Lauren had brought to light left her questioning everything she thought she knew about Michael. It wasn't just about one affair anymore. It was about a pattern of deception that had unraveled her trust. Michael's behavior over the past few weeks only added fuel to the fire. He had grown increasingly erratic, calling and texting Sarah at all hours, pleading for another chance. Each message was more desperate than the last, and though Sarah tried to maintain her composure, the cracks were beginning to show. One evening, as Sarah sat at the dining table reviewing orders for the flower shop, her phone buzzed for the third time that hour. She glanced at the screen. Michael again. She sighed, her patience wearing thin. Picking up the phone, she answered, her tone sharper than she intended. "What is it, Michael?" There was a pause on the other end before his voice came through, unsteady and anxious. "Sarah, I need to see you. Please. Just one conversation, that's all I'm asking." Sarah leaned back in her chair, pinching the bridge of her nose. "We've had this conversation, Michael. I don't know what else there is to say." "It's different this time," he insisted. "I've been doing some thinking, and there's something you need to know." Her curiosity was piqued despite herself. "What are you talking about?" "Can we meet?" he asked, his voice breaking slightly. "Please, I owe you the truth." After a long pause, Sarah finally agreed. "Fine, tomorrow, at the park noon." The next day, Sarah arrived at the park early. The crisp autumn air carried the scent of fallen leaves, and the sound of children laughing on the playground provided a stark contrast to the tension bubbling inside her. She spotted Michael sitting on a bench near the duck pond, his hands clasped tightly together. As she approached, he looked up, his expression a mixture of guilt and hope. Sarah sat down on the far end of the bench, keeping a deliberate distance between them. "Okay, Michael," she said, folding her arms. "I'm here. What is it?" He took a deep breath, his eyes fixed on the ground. "I've been lying to you for a long time, not just about Lauren, but about a lot of things." Sarah's stomach tightened. "Go on." "I was scared," he admitted. "Scared of losing you. Scared of admitting to myself that I was the one ruining our marriage. When things got tough, I looked for distractions instead of dealing with the problems. Lauren was just one of many." The words hit Sarah like a punch to the gut. She had suspected as much, but hearing it from him was a different kind of pain. "Why now?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I need to take responsibility," he said. "I've spent so much time blaming you, blaming everyone else, when the truth is, I'm the one who messed up, and I can't live with myself if I don't tell you everything." Sarah stared at him, searching his face for sincerity. She could see the regret in his eyes, but it wasn't enough to erase the damage he had done. "Thank you for telling me the truth," she said finally. "But that doesn't change anything. I can't go back, Michael. I can't pretend this didn't happen." He nodded, his shoulders slumping. "I understand. I just needed you to know." As Sarah stood to leave, Michael reached out, his hand brushing against hers. "For what it's worth," he said softly, "I'm sorry." She looked down at him, her expression unreadable. "I hope you find a way to forgive yourself, Michael, but I'm not the person who can help you do that." That conversation marked a turning point for Sarah. It was the moment she realized she didn't need closure from Michael. She needed it from herself. She had spent so much time trying to make sense of his actions, but now she understood that his choices weren't a reflection of her worth. They were his burdens to bear. In the weeks that followed, Sarah focused on rebuilding her life with a renewed sense of purpose. She threw herself into her work, expanding the flower shop's online presence and hosting workshops for the community. The shop became a sanctuary, not just for Sarah, but for the customers who found comfort in the beauty she created. Jamie, too, seemed to be adjusting to the new normal. Sarah made it a priority to spend quality time with him, taking him to the park, helping with his homework, and even teaching him how to arrange flowers. Their bond grew stronger, and Sarah found solace in the love they shared. The climax of the story came on a cold winter evening, during the town's annual holiday festival. The streets were lined with twinkling lights, and the air buzzed with the sound of carolers and laughter. Sarah had set up a booth for the flower shop, selling festive wreaths and centerpieces. As she greeted customers and handed out hot cider, she spotted Michael across the square. He was standing alone, his hands shoved deep into his coat pockets, as he watched Jamie toss snowballs with a group of kids. For a moment, their eyes met, and Sarah saw a flicker of something she couldn't quite place. Regret, perhaps, or longing. Michael didn't approach her, and Sarah was grateful for that. She wasn't ready to revisit the past, not here, not now. But as she watched him turn and walk away, she felt a strange sense of peace. They were two people on different paths, and that was okay. The festival ended with a fireworks display, and as Sarah stood under the glittering sky with Jamie by her side, she realized she was finally free. Free from the anger, the pain, and the weight of Michael's betrayal. She had found her strength not in holding on, but in letting go. Life wasn't perfect, but it was hers to rebuild. And as the fireworks lit up the night, Sarah smiled, knowing that her story was far from over. Life is full of challenges, but it's how we rise from them that defines us. If you've been inspired by Sarah's journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more stories like this. And as always, let me know your thoughts in the comments. I love hearing from you. As winter settled over the town, the cold winds carried with them an air of finality. Sarah had done her best to move forward, but the echoes of Michael's betrayal still lingered in the corners of her mind. It wasn't just about the affair. It was about everything it symbolized. The years of trust shattered, the dreams derailed, the family she had worked so hard to build. The tension came to a head one evening when Jamie came home from a weekend visit with Michael. He was unusually quiet, picking at his dinner and avoiding eye contact. Sarah sensed something was wrong, but decided to wait until he was ready to talk. Later that night, as she tucked him into bed, Jamie finally spoke. "Mum," he said hesitantly, "does Dad not like me anymore?" The question hit Sarah like a punch to the gut. "What, of course he likes you, sweetheart. Why would you think that?" Jamie fidgeted with the edge of his blanket. "He's always on his phone when I'm with him, and when I tried to show him my drawings, he said he was too busy." Sarah's heart ached as she hugged her son tightly. "I'm so sorry, Jamie. Your dad loves you very much, but sometimes grown-ups don't know how to show it. That's not your fault, okay?" Jamie nodded, but the sadness in his eyes lingered as he drifted off to sleep. As Sarah sat by his bedside, a wave of anger surged through her. Michael's selfishness wasn't just affecting her anymore. It was hurting their son. And that was something she couldn't ignore. The next day, Sarah called Michael and demanded a meeting. They met at a coffee shop, the atmosphere tense as they sat across from each other. Michael looked tired, his eyes shadowed and his shoulders slumped. "We need to talk about Jamie," Sarah began, her tone firm. Michael nodded. "Is everything okay?" "No, Michael, it's not," she said bluntly. "Jamie came home last night feeling like you don't care about him. He thinks you don't like him." Michael's face fell. "What? That's not true. I love Jamie." "Then show it," Sarah shot back. "Put down your phone. Pay attention to him. Be the father he deserves." Michael rubbed his hands over his face, guilt written all over him. "I didn't realize he felt that way. I'll do better. I promise." Sarah sighed, her frustration tempered by a flicker of hope. "This isn't about you making promises, Michael. It's about following through. Jamie needs you to be present, not just physically, but emotionally." Michael nodded again, his expression earnest. "You're right, I'll make it right." Sarah wanted to believe him, for Jamie's sake. But she couldn't ignore the nagging doubt in her heart Michael had made promises before, and she'd learned the hard way that his words didn't always translate into actions. As Christmas approached, Sarah threw herself into creating a magical holiday for Jamie. She decorated the house with twinkling lights, baked cookies, and even let Jamie help pick out a tree from the local lot. Despite everything, she was determined to give him a sense of normalcy and joy. Michael, to his credit, made an effort as well. He attended Jamie's school play, helped him build a gingerbread house, and even spent an afternoon sledding with him at the park. For a moment, Sarah allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. But the illusion shattered one evening when Sarah received an unexpected visitor. Lauren was back. Sarah opened the door to find Lauren standing on the porch, bundled in a coat but visibly uneasy. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the tension between them palpable. "What do you want, Lauren?" Sarah asked, her voice cold. "I know I'm the last person you want to see," Lauren began. "But there's something you need to know. It's about Michael." Sarah sighed, her patience wearing thin. "What now?" Lauren hesitated, her eyes darting to the ground. "He's still seeing someone else, I found out through a mutual friend." The words stung, but Sarah wasn't surprised. She had always suspected that Michael's promises were too good to be true. Still, hearing it confirmed brought a fresh wave of anger and disappointment. "Why are you telling me this?" Sarah asked, her tone sharp. "Because you deserve better," Lauren said simply. I know I've done a lot of damage, but I want to make things right, even if it's just by being honest with you." Sarah didn't respond right away. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath to steady herself. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm but resolute. "Thank you for telling me, but I don't need you or Michael to fix this for me. I'll handle it on my own." Lauren nodded, her expression a mixture of regret and understanding. "I'm sorry, Sarah, for everything." With that, Lauren turned and walked away, leaving Sarah standing in the doorway, her thoughts racing. The next day, Sarah confronted Michael. She didn't wait for excuses or explanations. She laid everything out on the table. "I know about the other woman," she said, her voice steady, "and I'm done giving you chances. This is it, Michael." Michael didn't deny it. He simply looked at her, his face pale and his shoulders slumped in defeat. "I don't know what's wrong with me," he admitted. "I keep messing up, and I don't know how to stop." "That's not my problem anymore," Sarah said firmly. "You need to figure that out for yourself. But I won't let you drag Jamie down with you." Michael nodded, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I understand." For the first time, Sarah felt a sense of closure. It wasn't the resolution she had hoped for, but it was enough. She had drawn a line, and this time, she was determined not to let anyone cross it. The climax of the story came on Christmas Eve. Sarah and Jamie were curled up on the couch, watching a holiday movie and sipping hot cocoa. The room was filled with the warm glow of the Christmas tree, and for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt at peace. Michael had called earlier in the day, asking to see Jamie. Sarah had agreed, but with one condition: the visit would be brief, and it would take place at her house. When Michael arrived, he was subdued, his usual bravado replaced by a quiet humility. He handed Jamie a wrapped present, his smile genuine as he watched his son tear into the paper. Inside was a handmade model airplane, one that Michael had spent hours building. Jamie's face lit up with excitement, and for a moment, Sarah saw a glimpse of the man she had once loved. As the evening came to a close, Michael pulled Sarah aside. "Thank you," he said softly, "for letting me be here." Sarah nodded, her expression neutral. "This is about Jamie, that's all." Michael looked like he wanted to say more, but he didn't push it. Instead, he hugged Jamie goodbye and left, leaving Sarah to savor the quiet joy of the evening. That night, as Sarah tucked Jamie into bed, he looked up at her and smiled. This was the best Christmas ever. Sarah kissed his forehead, her heart swelling with love. "I'm glad, sweetheart, you deserve it." And in that moment, Sarah realized that while her life hadn't turned out the way she had planned, it was still full of hope and possibility. She had survived the storm, and now it was time to rebuild. Life's hardest moments often teach us the most valuable lessons. If Sarah's journey has inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more stories of resilience and strength. And as always, leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. In the days following Christmas, Sarah found herself reflecting on how far she had come. The past year had been a whirlwind of heartbreak, betrayal, and self-discovery, but she had emerged stronger than she ever thought possible. The storm that had threatened to consume her life was finally behind her, and for the first time in months, she felt a sense of peace. Michael had stayed true to his word about focusing on Jamie. Though their relationship remained strained, Sarah could see that he was making an effort to be more present for their son. He attended Jamie's soccer games, showed up for school events, and even managed to have meaningful conversations during their visits. It wasn't perfect, but it was a step in the right direction. For Sarah, rebuilding her life was no longer about picking up the pieces of her marriage. It was about creating something entirely new. The flower shop had become a symbol of her resilience, a place where she could channel her creativity and connect with the community. She started hosting floral workshops, collaborating with local businesses, and even expanded her services to include weddings and special events. One afternoon, while arranging a bouquet in the shop, Sarah was approached by her friend, Rachel, who had been one of her biggest supporters through everything. "You know," Rachel said with a smile, "you're a completely different person than you were a year ago." Sarah laughed softly, wiping her hands on her apron. "You think so?" "I know so," Rachel replied. "You're stronger, more confident, and you're finally putting yourself first." Sarah thought about that for a moment. Rachel was right. The Sarah of a year ago would have bent over backward to keep everyone else happy, even at the expense of her own well-being. But now, she had learned to set boundaries, to stand up for herself, and to prioritize the things that truly mattered. The resolution of Sarah's story wasn't about revenge or dramatic confrontations. It was about healing. She had spent so much time trying to understand why Michael had betrayed her, why Lauren had crossed those lines, and why her life had taken such an unexpected turn. But in the end, the answers didn't matter as much as the lessons she had learned. One of the most important lessons was the power of forgiveness, not for others, but for herself. Sarah realized she had been carrying the weight of her own guilt and self-blame for far too long. Letting go of that burden allowed her to truly move forward. As the seasons changed and winter melted into spring, Sarah began to notice the little things that brought her joy. The way Jamie's laughter filled the house, the satisfaction of creating something beautiful with her hands, and the quiet moments of solitude where she could simply breathe. She didn't need grand gestures or sweeping changes to find happiness. She found it in the small, everyday moments. Michael, too, seemed to be finding his way. Though their romantic relationship was over, he was becoming a better father, and that was enough for Sarah. They found a way to co-parent amicably, putting Jamie's needs above their own. It wasn't always easy, but it was worth it. The final chapter of Sarah's journey came on a sunny day in early summer. The flower shop was bustling with customers, and Sarah was in her element, greeting familiar faces and arranging bouquets. As she worked, she noticed a man lingering near the display of potted plants. He was tall, with an easy smile and a kind demeanor that immediately put her at ease. "Looking for something in particular?" Sarah asked, wiping her hands on her apron. The man chuckled. "I'm terrible at this. My sister just moved into a new place, and I promised to get her a housewarming gift. Any recommendations?" Sarah smiled, leading him to a row of vibrant succulents. "These are low maintenance and hard to kill, perfect for anyone who might not have a green thumb." "Sold," he said, picking up a pot. "I'm Ben, by the way." "Sarah," she replied, shaking his hand. Their interaction was brief, but it left Sarah with a strange sense of excitement, a feeling she hadn't allowed herself to experience in a long time. It wasn't about romance or moving on from Michael. It was about opening herself up to new possibilities, whatever they might be. In the weeks that followed, Ben became a regular at the shop, stopping by to chat or pick up flowers for his sister. Their conversations were easy, filled with laughter and a sense of familiarity that felt refreshing. Sarah didn't rush into anything. She wasn't ready for that yet. But she appreciated the way Ben treated her, with kindness and respect. By the time Jamie's summer break rolled around, Sarah felt like a completely different person. She had learned to embrace the unknown, to find beauty in the unexpected, and to trust herself again. Life wasn't perfect, but it was hers. And that was enough. The story of Sarah's journey wasn't about finding a fairy tale ending. It was about discovering her own strength, learning to let go, and creating a life that brought her joy. She didn't need to be defined by her past or her pain. She was defined by the choices she made to move forward. Thank you for following Sarah's journey with me. If this story resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more inspiring tales of resilience and transformation. Don't forget to leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, take care and keep moving forward.